We're the Hydradenitis Super Divas. If you've got HS, you'll want to meet us. It's not your fault, put the shame to a halt. HS Divas know how to have a ball. The Hydradenitis Super Divas. Put the shame to a halt, cause it's not your fault.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Hydradenitis Super Divas. I'm Brindley and I'm going to do this one solo today, and we're going to talk about parenting a child with HS. So for anybody who knows me, you know that this is a near and dear topic to my heart. I have two daughters with Hydradenitis suppurativa. They are supradivas, but I have two daughters with Hydradenitis suppurativa as well. I have a 16-year-old who has stage 2 HS, and I also have a 21-year-old stepdaughter who has stage 1 HS. The interesting thing is my 21-year-old stepdaughter's boyfriend has HS, her grandfather has HS, her mom has HS, and her boyfriend's father also had HS. So again, HS isn't rare, it's just rarely talked about. And it's one of those things that when you decide to become a parent, it's really hard not to focus so much on whether your child will have HS or not. We know that there is somewhat of a familial link. Right now they're saying it's about 33%, and there needs to be a lot more research done on that with genetics to figure out what the actual familial link is for genetics. So we're also going to be working with a geneticist on a project that's coming soon, so stay tuned for that, where we're trying to capture more getting DNA swabs from people with HS so that we can look at the gene mutations on that as well. But as far as parenting children with HS, I'd say one of the main things is not to focus so much on whether your child is going to have HS or not. I know that a lot of parents can panic as soon as they see this, the sight of some kind of skin condition or even an isolated boil on their children's skin, and instantly panic and put that fear onto their children as well, which is completely understandable. But at the same time, it's really important to try not to focus on that, because all we're doing is instilling fear in our kids about something that they don't have any control over anyway, and nor do you. So it's really important to try to remember that you are setting the tone for them as to how to deal with their HS. So if they should develop HS later in life, or even as a child, which we know is possible, it's really important to just set the tone for them on how they can expect to deal with their HS journey. And I think we have more of an ability to create an impact than we think that we do, just in how we handle our own HS journey. So for children who have HS, or teenagers even, a couple of the things that I recommend, and my kids are fortunate enough to have had me, just like your children or child will be fortunate enough to have you should they have HS, to be kind of a guiding source for them, which is invaluable. And for the parents who don't have HS themselves, I am so sorry. It's so hard to understand and articulate from your kid's point of view necessarily how HS impacts us. So I think it's important, these topics are very important for you to know as well. One of the things, especially for parents who don't have HS themselves, is it does not matter how large or small the abscess is, it hurts an immense amount. So it may look like a small mosquito bite to you, but what you don't see is all of that inflammation underneath that is building and building and so incredibly painful. So please don't belittle your child's condition and say like, oh my God, that's just a small bump, you should be fine. You have no idea what that feels like underneath, and I would just implore you to ask your child what that feels like. Ask them questions. Be open about their HS with them, not to the point necessarily where it may make them uncomfortable, but ask them to tell you what that's like so that you can understand it from their perspective. The other thing I would recommend as far as in school, we have a letter on HS Connect that you can print off and give to your child's school that explains what HS is and some special accommodations that they may need. A couple of the things we've done for my daughter is that we got a note from the dermatologist for PE all year that said that she did not have to participate in PE if she didn't feel she was able to. So it gave her the autonomy to decide for herself whether she was able to participate in PE or not. That wasn't up to the teacher, it wasn't up to me, it was totally up to her. And it put her in control of her own care and how she felt about her HS and whether she could participate or not. As a side note, I thought she would use the note like every single day, but she only ended up using it twice. So my fear was assuaged with that, because they don't want to sit out. They don't want to be different. They don't want to have any attention drawn to them because of their disease. So they don't want to sit on the sidelines if they don't have to. They want to participate. They just want to be normal kids. So giving them the opportunity to make that decision for themselves is so important. The other thing we did was got a note that said she was able to leave the classroom at any point for any reason without having permission. So for parents who don't have HS, we can have spontaneous drainage, like our abscesses may just all of a sudden decide right now is the opportune time to drain. And there is no time to raise a hand and ask for a bathroom pass or wait until Susie gets back from the bathroom. It's just not a thing. So your kid needs to have the ability to get up and leave the classroom and go to the bathroom when they need to without having to ask permission or wait for someone to return. Some of the things that can be problematic in schools for kids with HS would be the chairs that they have to sit on. So if they're having a flare in their groin, inner thighs, buttocks, it may be extremely uncomfortable for them to sit on those chairs all day. Unlike, parents who we get to, change up our workspace or our situation, or as an adult, you're not necessarily as embarrassed to take a donut cushion, to work and sit on that, or add an extra pad to your chair or something like that to make it more comfortable for yourself. Although I asked my 16-year-old if she wanted to take the butt pillow to school, and that was a big no. They don't have the ability to do that the way that we do. They're embarrassed by it too, so I can imagine that they wouldn't want to do that. And for adults, it's more commonplace, and it would be okay to bring in an extra cushy pillow because you're sitting in your desk all day. These guys are changing classrooms. They're constantly between places. The other issue is in science, sometimes they still have the stools. And I know for myself as an adult, my group of friends wanted to go to a bar, and I was like, I'm going to go ahead and sit this one out because they only had bar stools there. So if I know I'm making that decision as an adult because of my personal HS, and yet my kid has to go sit on a really, really hard stool in science, that could present an issue. The other part is carrying backpacks when they have armpit flares can be extremely painful. So again, being the uncool mom, I asked my kid if she would carry, or take one of the suitcase-like, suitcase-like backpacks, the rolly backpacks. That was a big no as well. So I get that too, because again, they don't want to be different and they just want to be like everybody else. So some things that you might want to kind of implement and keep in mind, and advocate for your child, and have your child, it shows them how to advocate for themselves as well, how to ask for what it is that they need, how to put it out there, how to work with accommodations, because that's going to be something that's important for the rest of their lives, especially with HS. So showing them the roadmap on how that works is going to be a really helpful thing. If you get pushback from your school, which we didn't get any pushback on anything until we got to high school. Then it became a little bit more of an issue. But we were still able to work with her teachers to accommodate all of her needs without having to go with a 504 plan. So if you're having issues with your school, there is a way to do this. It's called a 504 plan. And it's something that the child's doctor would have to sign off on as well. But most physicians are accustomed to doing this, and it should not be a huge deal. You can ask for specific accommodations to be made for your child, just like we had talked about all these accommodations. And then that is something that has to be followed by all of the teachers. It's not an optional thing. So I always go the, path of least resistance route first. So if I have a school and a principal and teachers who are willing to talk to me one-on-one about the condition or deal with and give her or any child the freedom that they need to move about with their HS, then I'm choosing not to go with a 504 plan. It's a lot more work, and I'm not having any pushback on it. So there's no reason to proceed with that kind of a thing. If you are getting pushback and you're having trouble making inroads with what you need to do, then by all means, I would recommend going with a 504 plan. It's not up for negotiation. You can ask for additional time for them to complete assignments if you need to. They can have extra testing time if they need it. So I would highly look into that and maybe get some tips and tricks from, as much as I don't like saying the internet, maybe from the internet, about things that you can request specifically for your child, because I think there are a lot of accommodations that we don't even know are possible as parents. The other thing is asking your child to be open with you when when they're having an issue. So I know that this can be really, really embarrassing for kids, especially because it can impact our most private areas. Although, again, it can impact anywhere there's a hair follicle on the body. So anywhere, you can get HS anywhere other than the palms of your hands, soles of your feet, and the red part of your lips. Anywhere else, it's fair game. So especially during the formational years, if you have a teenager with HS or a child who's going to enter puberty and already has HS, it's important to be able to give them their privacy and their dignity. And it's also important to ask them to tell you when something's going on so that you can, as a parent, which all of us want to do anyway, help them as much as you possibly can. Please don't ask them, try not to be intrusive with them. Don't ask always to see it. It's a horribly embarrassing condition as it is. And then when your mom wants to get all up in there, it can be really hard for kids. It's very intrusive. So I would say, as much as you possibly can, give them their dignity and let them just communicate with you verbally what's going on, so that they can feel like they're in charge of their own care and their own body. That's a really important thing as well. Getting them to the dermatologist as quickly as possible is really important so that you can get started on care. If your child has had 2 or more boil-like abscesses in the last 6 months, that is an indicator of HS. Not necessarily a 100% guarantee that they have it, but it's a really good indication that it may be HS. So if that's occurring, definitely go straight to a derm. There's great pediatric dermatologists, but they are often hard to get into. So if you have a teenager, you may be able to go just straight to a regular dermatologist for HS. And the hardest part, I think, about being a parent is not worrying so much about them at all times. We already worry about our kids tremendously. And then when you add HS in, I think we can tend to be helicopter parents. And that is something that we have to teach them independence and how to manage their condition independently, because at one point in the future, they will be independent. Asking them to help guide their own care and for them to have a voice in the decision-making process on medications, on treatment plans, on all of that is of the utmost importance. They are the ones living with the condition. They should be the ones telling you and advising as to what treatment plan they prefer, because this is impacting their lives. It also impacts the entire family. There's no doubt about that. So parents who don't have HS, this is a chronic condition. There is no cure for HS. It comes at the most inopportune times. Triggers differ per person, which we'll get into that in a minute because that's a whole other ball of wax. And it's just important to really let your kid do the leading. Again, it doesn't matter how big the abscess is, it's painful in most cases. It depends on where they are as well and what your kids are, if they're in sports, if they're in soccer, let's say, and they have an abscess in their groin or their inner thigh, that's gonna hurt a whole heck of a lot more than it is for them to have maybe an abscess in their armpit because of their activities. So it's really important to give them the autonomy to help them learn how to become part of that decision-making process, which they're going to have to do for the rest of their lives, not only in HS, but in their healthcare in general. So helping them learn how to roadmap that. And although you may have your fears about treatment options as a parent, I think it's necessary to have those conversations in front of your children and with the dermatologist. What are the real risks here? And asking your child and taking into account their opinion about whether that risk is worthwhile for them. And obviously they're not going to understand some of the risk-benefit factors. But if they're willing to, let's say, do an injection of a biologic every week or every other week because they feel like it's worth trying for their HS, it is imperative that you listen to them and take their opinion into account. You're not the person living with their disease, and you would hate for someone to make a decision about that for you. So I'm asking you to implore your children to have an opinion about this, to talk with them openly about the treatment options, things that may happen, things that may not happen, without a sense of fear attached to that. And I think that's a really important thing. Adults, we have so much more fear than our kids do about medicine and all of that, everything that comes along with that. But let's not impart our fear necessarily onto our children. Let's work from fact-based information instead of emotionally based information. And I think that's a really important factor. The other thing about HS that I wanted to touch on too is triggers. So triggers are HS is a very personal disease. It doesn't impact everyone the same. My HS is a different phenotype than my daughter's HS. So they don't act the same. So, even though she has, a gene mutation and came from me, we have very different HS. So it's very important to, even though you may be a parent with HS, your child's triggers may be different than yours. Some people never identify their triggers, and that's okay too. We know that stress is a trigger for most people, and sometimes when our kids are given a diagnosis of HS, and especially for people who don't have HS themselves, what happens is you go into overdrive, right? So as a society, we are always looking for the one core root of the problem. What needs to change so that I can change this? That isn't possible with HS, okay? HS is a systemic autoinflammatory condition. It's a chronic condition. There is no one root cause. They do not know exactly why it happens. So that's why we have to have more treatment options because it's not a one-size-fits-all disease. And the same thing applies for triggers. So what happens a lot of times is parents come home after getting an HS diagnosis for their child, and if they don't have HS themselves, the first thing they see is people changing diets. So instantly, as a parent, and this is not wrong of you because you're trying to do what's best for your kid, so please don't take this as a personal attack or anything, but you've just received this diagnosis that is life-changing for you and your child. Just sit with it for a little bit. Please don't do anything immediately. Accept, learn, educate yourself on the disease. Please not through Google. Please not through any of those other platforms or channels. Please go to HS Connect. Please educate yourself on HS and make changes slowly. Triggers are not always the same. They're not the same for everyone, and diet is a huge one. So we see a lot of parents who come home and they're like, okay, we're going, vegetarian, or we're not gonna, no more snacks or anything like that. And what happens with that kind of a process is, it's too fast. No one has actually even accepted the fact that you have HS yet and what this may look like. Or even educated yourself on it. All you want to do is to instantly fix the problem for your child, which again, I cannot blame you for. But what's happening is we're creating other issues by doing that. So when you do that to a child or to a teen or anybody, as we know from most people have dieted in the past, it's a really hard thing to stick to. And it's also a change that the entire family has to make, because you can't isolate one person in your family and expect them to change while everyone else continues the same. So it's a huge change for an entire family. And with stress being a trigger, sometimes that change can actually make HS worse because of the stress that's involved in a huge drastic change like that. So what I would implore parents to do, there's an HS app called Papaya, and it allows you to track flares. It allows you to track what you're eating. It allows you to track exercise, everything, daily medications, the whole thing. It was designed with HS patients. HS Connect was a part of designing this app with 2 HS specialists. It's an amazing app. So the first thing I would do is to download that. I would walk through it with your kid, show them how to use it, and then ask them to keep that daily. And then that will help determine what is driving their flares. And especially in a lot of females, it's a hormonal thing. So you'll see that pattern if they're using that app, that they are flaring before their period. So that may be a good indication that birth control may be a great option for them. And that's another thing with the treatment option piece of it. Like we had talked about earlier with keeping your mind open, the same thing. Parents, I know at 12 years old, 11 years old, it's not, it's not a perfect time to put your kid on birth control, because what we associate it with is the freedom for them to be sexually active in the States, I believe. That's my opinion anyway. I had to do the same thing for my child at about 11, was put her on birth control. And I had to look at this as this was a medical treatment. This is not a green light for her to be promiscuous or to engage in sexual activity. This is simply a treatment option for her to help her HS. So when you change the way that you're looking at things like that, it's very, very helpful. And I think, the same thing goes in line with, we had to do the same thing with getting her like thong underwear because it was really bothersome to her HS in specific areas when she was wearing a specific type of underwear. At first I was like, oh, no, that is not happening. And when she explained it to me, I was like, okay, I totally get it. Let's go. We're going to go buy some. So allowing your kids to verbalize that to you and to being open to that, I know how hard it is because I shut that shit down immediately when it happened to, is really leaving the door open for them to have communication, and open communication with you about why is really important. And what is it that they need? How can you help them? So please keep your mind open to treatment options. Wound care is another thing that we have to deal with, and telling your child, like, hey, if you need help, it's okay to ask me. You don't have to be embarrassed. I love you no matter what. I'm here to support you. If you need me to help you put a bandage on, please ask. I will totally help you, because sometimes where our abscesses are is very difficult to bandage. So telling them it's okay to ask for your help and that they don't need to be embarrassed or ashamed of what they're dealing with is a really, really important thing for kids. There's also some really great wound care that it can be on the expensive side, but in my opinion, it's worth it. I'll link it in the show notes here, but one of them is what we call in our house the cloud bandage. And it's basically, it almost feels like a memory foam bandage. And they're probably about $20, $25 for 10 of them. But for me, if it was the difference between my daughter going to school because of a flare in her inner thighs or her staying home, I will gladly pay for her to go to school when that's an option. And we don't use them all the time, only when they're necessary, because they are expensive and she knows that. So, we're kind of trying to be conscientious of the cost that comes along with HS as well. The other thing we've also discovered is tattoo tape. So when you have like a flare on your inner thigh and it's really hard to get a bandage to stick there, especially if there's friction, the tattoo tape, you can buy it. It's in a roll. It's fairly inexpensive. And then you can just apply that over the bandage and in a wider section so that the friction is not taking the bandage off. It's amazing. It doesn't hurt very much to remove. Give it a try if your kid is having an issue in one of those areas that is really difficult. The other thing, especially for parents who just have gotten an HS diagnosis for their kid, HS is not due to weight, and HS is not due to smoking. Hopefully your kids don't smoke, but if they do, it's not due to weight or smoking. So a lot of diagnoses are still coming with this stigma from dermatologists that patients need to lose weight and stop smoking. Again, yes, we know that weight loss is a great thing. It's better for your health. We know there is a link between metabolic syndrome and HS, but we know that the weight is not the cause of your HS. Okay, so the one thing, if you do anything or take anything from this podcast, is that your child's HS is not their fault. Okay? It's not their fault. They did nothing to start their HS. They are not doing anything to continue their HS happening. So please make sure that they understand that. Have a discussion with them about that. I know this is not your fault. I know as a parent it can be very frustrating when your child has HS because it does impact your life as well in a huge way. But it's so important to try to make sure that your kids understand it's not their fault, because we carry enough shame and guilt and burden with this disease as it is, that my hope is that in the future we can remove the shame and the stigma that comes with this so that nobody feels like their HS is their fault anymore, especially our kids. They carry so much on their shoulders with this diagnosis already. And to make sure that they understand that you will support them and that sometimes you may get frustrated with their HS, but it's not a frustration with them. Because as a parent, it's very frustrating that your child can't just be normal.
obviously more frustrating for them that they can't be normal than it is for you. But it's still very frustrating for a parent that their kid has to go through this, and sometimes that comes across to the child as a frustration with them. So please let your kids know and make sure that they know it's not their fault, that you know it's not their fault. It's the solo most important thing that you can do for your child so that they can alleviate the guilt that they're carrying about having HS and how hard it is on the family. And our goal at HS Connect, and my goal personally with having 2 kids with HS, is that shame and that burden and that stigma is lifted in society so that HS can just be another condition that needs to be treated like everything else is. And that we no longer have to walk around with that huge, immense shame that we do with our condition. So parenting a child with HS is not for the faint of heart. Parenting alone is not for the faint of heart. And then when you add a chronic condition like HS or any other dermatologic condition in there that impacts your child, especially the self-esteem piece of it, it's devastating to your child. I would highly encourage you to get your child into therapy. This is not because you're not a good parent, you're not a good role model for helping them deal with their HS. I think a diagnosis with HS and a referral to a therapist should come hand in hand. I don't think that anyone who's diagnosed with HS should not seek out therapy. I think it's absolutely a necessity. There's so much that happens in our daily lives that are different from average people, that we don't even understand how it's impacting our lives. And I think it's so important to go and talk through that with somebody. So please, talk to your child about whether they would be interested in going to therapy or not. We're working with Hope for HS on putting a teen support group together so that teens have a safe place to come and talk about their HS. It will be a moderated group, but we're really there to just let them talk and have support. There will also be residents there, dermatology residents, so that if there are questions that come up about HS, that they are getting accurate information as a response. So I think there's more to come on the teen aspect of it, but please, I know that parenting, again, is hard enough as it is, and then adding HS in there, but please just make sure your kids know that their HS isn't their fault. Make sure that they know you know that too. It's a devastating disease, and whatever you guys can do to help your kids navigate through this, do they need ice? Do they need heat? But also giving them some autonomy to make those decisions themselves and to also help themselves with their condition is of the utmost importance. So again, thank you for listening to my long diatribe about parenting with HS. I hope that you found it helpful. We do have some articles on our website about parenting with HS as well, and I'm sure there's going to be a whole other series that's going to come out about parenting with HS just because it's its own unique animal. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Hidradenitis Suppurativa, and we will see you on the next one. Bye!